introduce our guest, John Harmer. John's joining us today from sunny, warm Toronto.
It is sunny. I'll give you that.
From the frozen north. So John has been a product manager here in the Atlanta community for a couple of decades. John and I met years ago when he was at CBeyond and I was at Bell South. We met through the Tag Product Management Society and I think maybe the Wireless Technology Forum too.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. But we've kind of been collaborating and discussing our product management careers quite a bit over the last couple of decades. And it's weird that I'm talking about colleagues over a couple of decades now, but I'm getting to that age. So are you, my friend.
We are old, Jason.
But John most recently embarked on a new adventure, and it's not recent anymore. He's been there for a little while. John is a product manager with Google. And as we've been talking over the last few weeks, I know over the years, I've seen quite a few blog posts and questions on Quora and different topical conversations about the Google interview and hiring process, about some of Google's product management and business management practices. And so I thought it would be a really cool thing to have John come on, join us today and demystify some things or maybe share some of the things that he's learned over the last little while working at Google. So I'm going to start by just asking John, just to, you've done one of our How I Got Into Product Management intros, but why don't you give us a little quick recap about how you got to where you are today in terms of product management?
Yeah, sure. So the fast version, I was coming out of Georgia Tech. I was a developer at CNN for a period of time in their internet operations group. I got to be there for 2 elections. So I stayed up too late last night watching this one, as well as the events of September 11th, which was an interesting time to be in the news.
Oh, yeah.
Then I went and got an MBA, did some consulting, came out of my last consulting gig was with CBeyond, which is the first time I ever became a product manager. And then have been doing product management and or marketing titled roles ever since. Founded some companies, went through Techstars, worked at Leading Agile as a consultant for a bit. And now I find myself in the frozen tundra working for Google.
Cool. So tell us about your role at Google. What are some of the things that you're working on there that you can talk about at least? Tell us about your role at Google in general.
Yeah, so I'm on the Gmail team.
Nice.
RIP old logo. Specifically in charge of what we call a platform and ecosystem. So anybody who wants to integrate into Gmail, there's a side, or actually throughout Google Workspace, there's a little side panel we call the companion bar. It's got things like calendar keeping tasks in it for most people. You can also integrate third-party tools in there, as well as the product we call Dynamic Mail. It's AMP for email. It's a way of baking interactivity into email. If you've ever used Google Docs comments, those emails are powered by AMP. And so it's ways that third parties can surface functionality inside of Google Workspace largely. And it's a really cool role because I get to work with our 2.6 billion monthly active users, but also with the entire ecosystem of developer partners. We just had like a blog with Adobe for last week because they released something cool and new on my platform. And so I get to walk that line. It's a lot of fun for me to walk with customers, partners, and so.
And you read every customer comment that ever comes in about.
People do think I am somehow responsible for all of Gmail from time to time.
Absolutely. Sure. So there've been a lot of stories about the interview process at Google. It's been fairly well documented in some circles, but there still seems to be a little bit of mystery to it as well. I'm curious if you could tell us about your experience as you were applying and interviewing with Google, kind of what that was like for you.
Yeah, I tried to get interviews a number of times through the traditional get a referral, apply for a job kind of way, and never got had much success with that. Like no recruiter ever reached back out to me. And then another Atlanta product management guy by the name of Mark Wood had been talking to a Google recruiter, and she was like, "You're going to have to move." And he said, "I don't want to move." So he sent her my way. And so that's how I got past that first initial hurdle. Excuse me. And from there, I went through the process knowing full well that at each step I was not going to make it any further, just because of the mystique behind it all, and all, the numbers are just not in your favor going through this process. And Google definitely would much rather have false negatives, so not hire good candidates, than to have false positives to hire a bad candidate. And that is why the process is designed the way it's designed. And I'm happy to talk through what that process is. Yeah, it's probably a good time to talk through that process. And so what happens is you do a phone screen with a recruiter. You can fall off at any one of these steps. Then you do a phone screen with a product manager. Then you do what is apocryphally called on-site interviews, which are no longer on-site, which is a panel or a series of 5 different interviews. One of them's with a tech lead, 4 of them with product managers. And that's like an all-day gauntlet. And then all of that information, those 5 interviews, the one phone screen, the recruiter phone screen, anybody who Google will then reach out to anybody at Google who you might know, who went to your same school at the same time, worked at the same company as you at the same time, and say, do you know this person? Those people will submit feedback, and then you whatever your references and things you put in all goes into this packet that goes to a thing called the hiring committee, which is a bunch of strangers. None of the people who have talked to you to this point. And they just look at this packet, and it's largely anonymized. When we do interview notes, we write the candidate and they and stuff like that to try to remove bias from this process as much as possible. That hiring committee looks at that packet and it gives you the Caesar thumbs up or thumbs down. And at that point, then you are approved to be a Google product manager, and you go to the next stage, which is team matching. So that packet about you goes around to the different teams that are looking to hire people. And, people say, I want to talk to this one, that one, and this one. They set up a thing. It's like a 2-way interview. You're interviewing them. They're interviewing you for fit more than for, can you be a Google product manager? You've already sort of got that seal of approval. And so I had 3 team matching team things. And then you like sort of like med school matching, you mutually agree that it's a thing. And then it goes to, I guess, compensation committee, who determines what your offer is going to be. There's actually not a lot of negotiation in that process. Your recruiter is supposed to be doing the negotiating on your behalf. The best thing you can do to increase your Google offer is to have an offer from somebody else that Google cares about, as you would imagine. And then it goes to like a VP approval, and then you're in. For me, that process took from July of 2018 to the end of December 2018. So it is not a quick process.
Yeah, no kidding.
And again, we move slowly on purpose. Not everybody's process is as slow as mine was, but we move slowly on purpose so that we don't make mistakes. And most of the people that I've met at Google had to go through this process more than once to get in. It is extremely common for people to try and fail and try and fail and try.
Sure. So stage 1 is, let's just determine if you would be a good product manager at Google first, period. Are you a Google product manager type of person?
That's right.
And then step 2 is, now let's find the job within the Google product management organization that creates the best mutual fit.
That's right.
And then step 3
when we got close on that,
agree on terms.
Yeah, exactly. When we got close on that one for the Gmail team, I ended up talking to, I don't know, another 4 or so people as part of that matching process. So
yeah,
it was lengthy.
Yeah, it sounds like it. But congratulations. Obviously, it's been a good fit. For those of you, John and I have actually worked together in my last role. We had a little bit of a communication on his product and my product. So I know it's been a good ride for you. So congratulations on that.
Thanks.
So, when we talk about Google, one of there's a term that floats around out there. I've seen it on the internet a few times, and I've heard it mentioned a couple of times. There's this concept of googliness. And it sounds like it goes back to the would you be a good fit for the company? Would you be a good product manager? But it's more than that too. What is in your view? What is googliness?
That is a great question. It is the desire to do the right thing. It is your going above and beyond for the good of the goal. It is being a good listener, empathetic teammate. It is all of those kind of intangible things that make you a good employee, make you a good teammate. We have an internal rubric by which we measure this, but even with that, it feels a little fuzzy.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of things on the web. If you poke around, you can find some various ex-Googlers who talk about it. But yeah, it's that would you fit here? Are you gonna be an excellent Googler? Are you gonna try to figure out how to 10x things? All the things that Google does.
Yep. Cool. That actually came in. That was a question that was submitted at the survey that I sent out to the Product Coffee audience, and so I thought we'd dig in on that a little bit. So, as you look at your role at Google now and other product management roles that you've held in the past, how are things the same and how are they different? How does being a product manager at Google on a day-to-day basis compare to other product management roles that you've had?
Great. Okay. So every product management role that I've ever had has been somehow different. It all stems back to product being a relatively ill-defined thing, or at least historically has been. Maybe we're honing in on a clear definition of it, but I feel like every company, it is somewhat different. And I will also say that even within Google, every team, it is somewhat different what your role is, right? So our job is to fill in that white space and do the things that need to get done to get a good product out the door. So how is Google in particular different, or at least my current team, the Gmail team, different than the other things I've done before? I was talking about this somewhere else. But basically, before there was always like this, let's make the case to leadership that this is a thing we need to build. And at Google, it's a little bit more like, let me make the case to my engineering team that this is the thing we need to build. And also at every step, we reanalyze, is this still something we need to be working on? Using whatever metrics we have, is like, is it producing the results we hoped it would? Is this we talk about at Google, we talk a lot about landings, not launches. So launching a product is great, good for you, but like, did it do anything? Does anybody care? Have you made your users' lives better in any meaningful way? And so re-justifying the existence of your project, of your product, is something that happens relatively frequently. And in particular, my boss is really good at that's a no-go for sure. Being the department of no. Not out of maliciousness, but it's like, here's 10 things we could do. He's like, cool, what's the one thing that's really going to matter of those 10? And let's do that one better than trying to do 10 of them, kind of. And so it's like, it's the most real version of ruthless prioritization I've ever seen. And the re-justification of your product's continued existence is also a real and interesting thing.
Yeah, that ruthless prioritization being a hallmark there. That sounds interesting. And we're going to come back to that topic actually, because I really want to ask you a little bit later on about focus on priorities and how that applies to your product management role at Google. But before I do that, before I get to that, I meant to mention to everyone, please jump in if you have any questions that you want to ask, or if you want to go deeper on any of the topics. This is not the Jason, Brett, and John Harmer show. This is Product Coffee. It's a collaborative event. So if you have things you want to jump in with and ask about, feel free to do so. And I see Jessica, you had a question that you wanted to ask on that topic. You want to take it for a second?
You bet. Good morning. This is Jessica Landisman-Williams from Decatur. And my question is very similar to the one that Jason just asked. And really, how Google approaches product differently and how that impacts the outcome. Because I think that unless you pay really close attention in some veins and circles, you see that Google pulls down a number of products and features, I think far more aggressively than many companies where I've worked. And I get that as a product manager. I get that as a corporate citizen. We want to put our resources in the places where they're going to be have the highest impact. Also, I'd like to jump in a little bit and delve a little deeper into your point that you have to make the case to the engineering team.
Oh yeah,
That's
sure.
very different. And historically, engineers have not had the tightest relationship with the customers. So I'd love for you to fill in the white space there.
Yeah, for sure. I'll start on that part. There is a great deal of autonomy pushed down in the organization at Google. In my time, I don't think I've seen but maybe one thing that felt like a leadership mandate that we were going to work on this because some vice president somewhere said we needed to. Most of my experience has been we're going to work on this because we think we need to. And it's my job as a product manager to have that relationship with the customer and to bring that information to the table. You are correct. Even at Google, even with a developer-facing product like the platform thing that I'm in charge of, our developers do not generally meet with customers or partners. Excuse me. And so I am the voice of the customer internally. Excuse me, goodness. And that is, so it's the combination of these sort of customer interview things that I do a lot of because I enjoy them and they're valuable, and the product data itself. So we have tons of dashboards and instrumentation of our things. And then, so we do some direct UX research. Both, you may have noticed little pop-up happiness surveys in the corner of Google products from time to time, or we have panels and groups of people we go to and ask questions. And so we collect all of that into making a case for whatever the thing is. And I make the case to the sort of engineering leadership over either an individual team for a specific product, or maybe that Uber, what we call Uber team leads, on a more broad strategic kind of a direction. And they can, theoretically they can say no. If I haven't done my homework, if I don't have good justification for doing these things, they should in fact push back on me and say no, and say, I don't understand the justification for this. Can you bring me more data? And it doesn't happen that frequently. You develop trust with your team, but the trust is earned by owning that customer relationship and, bringing data to the table. So.
Thanks. Great.
Yeah.
That earned trust. Excellent. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about tools. I think that's often a question that is pretty interesting to understand from other product managers, regardless of what company you work for. What are some of the tools that you use? Does Google approach product management tooling and applications in a different way than other places that you've worked? What are the kind of tools that you use on a day-to-day basis just to do your job at Google?
I don't know if this will be surprising at all to people, but I use Google Docs, Sheets, and Slides pretty extensively. The culture of collaboration at Google is like deeply ingrained in the DNA. The number of Google Docs comments that are made is, some astronomical number. Like, that is how we collaborate. We make a document, we share it with people, they put in comments. We have long conversations in those comments sometimes. Sometimes we'll elevate that conversation into a meeting. And that's a lot of, sort of making that process easier and better is a lot of the whole new Google Workspace redesign and how we're baking more functionality and stuff into Gmail to make our users' lives better and be more productive. But yeah, those three tools are used extremely extensively. Plus, we have a ton of other home-built things. We have our own internal bug tracking tool. If it's bugs, feature requests, whatever. Many of the teams internally at Google use that. Let's see. We have our own dashboarding products and data products. I haven't seen a whole lot of third-party software being used outside of things like our sales teams use third-party CRMs most of the time. We use, our HR teams use third-party HR software just because it's not in our wheelhouse to create that kind of thing. But for, software development, we're a bunch of engineers and making tools that a bunch of engineers use. And so they do a lot of that. There's a lot of in-house built tools that get used.
Cool. Heavy reliance, of course, on the G Suite or what's the new name?
Google Workspace.
Google Workspace. Thank you. I'll have
the way I can remember it is because G Suite had an S in it and Workspace has an S in it, and that way I don't say the wrong name.
Okay. Excellent. So when you think about career success and role success at Google in your role, what is it? What would you say is the key to being a successful product manager at Google? We've talked about just getting to the role, but then for ongoing success, what is the key to being a successful product manager at Google, in your opinion?
We have it's called every job has a ladder internally, which describes the different levels and what you need to be doing at those different levels to be successful. And so on the product management side, it's things like impact. And so there's two aspects to impact. It's what is the impact that this product had on Google overall, and what was your impact on that product? So you need to lead efforts that without you or somebody like you, they would not have gotten done, or would have not gotten done at the level of quality that they were done or whatever. And then those efforts need to matter to Google, right? So that's one of the big things. And that's why we talk about landings, not launches, because that is the did it matter to Google part. And then there's, sort of the leadership-y kinds of things that you get measured on as a product manager, because it's all leading by influence, right? The engineers do not report to you. They report on an engineering ladder up to an engineering manager, right? And then there's, sort of the product skills, can you cast a compelling vision? Do you communicate effectively? All of those things go into measuring you as a product manager. And then, so the things you launch need to matter. So that's where we get metrics involved in there. And then Google has a once or twice a year review process that is relatively extensive. We call it perf internally, where your peers give you either a quick rating or a very detailed rating, depending on how much feedback you want. And it's like a real commitment. Like, people put deep thought into this. It's not some 5 minutes, I'm going to click some buttons and move on with my day. Like, people put real useful thought into this, and that goes into your actual ratings as your job performance. So it's really actually quite interesting the way they do that.
Sounds like it. It sounds like really focusing. You've mentioned the culture of collaboration a few times, and the heavy commenting. But it sounds like even from a professional and personal development perspective, Googlers are really focused on helping their colleagues evolve on a personal and professional level.
Yeah, it's kind of like a 360 every year. If you think about it that way, because your manager gives you comments, the peers you're working with give you comments, people who work for you give you comments, and it's super valuable. Like, hopefully, obviously, with any review process, hopefully you're not coming to that and being surprised by things. You have good communication, with the teams and all. It's the usual stuff, but it is very cool to get that feedback that way.
Sounds hugely valuable, and the kind of best practice that really likely leads to Google's excellence in so many areas. So I do want to kind of take that part of the conversation, and I'm curious also. There's been a lot of writing and publication and conversation about Google's leadership in really creating massive focus on priorities through OKRs, objectives and key results, for those who aren't familiar with that, which was a kind of a concept that was initially institutionalized by Andy Grove over at Intel and has been really evangelized over the last couple of decades by John Doerr. But what has, when you think about how you use OKRs, how do they impact your day-to-day work? And how does that layer into your ongoing measurement as a product manager in your role as well at Google?
Yeah. So yes, we do OKRs at Google. It is part of the DNA. And it's both top down and bottom up. So there are product area level OKRs. So, that the Google Workspace apps thing, or even at the higher level, at like Google Cloud level OKRs that are, broad and strategic. And then each team comes up with their own. Next year, we plan to do X, not necessarily roadmap stuff, but some of it on the bottom up side feels a little roadmappy, but it's like your objective is to do X, which is measured by the key results of Y. And so those key results should be measurable things: customer satisfaction, utilization, number. Trying to think of some of the ones that have been mine. Number of apps published by top developers. Whatever, like something that matters as a key result, and it's in service of this larger objective. And every quarter we grade ourselves on those OKRs, and if you get, it's on a 0 to 1 scale. And if you get all ones, it means your OKRs weren't ambitious enough. Like success is getting a 7, 0.7 or 0.6, maybe 0.8. That is generally success. It means you're ambitious and you're stretching the right amount. Anything below that means you failed to achieve your OKR. And I love that a C, if you're thinking about it, right, is kind of expected, right? That means you're trying really hard. You're trying to do ambitious things. And that's part of that culture. Google wants to do products, wants to create things in the world that have massive impact. And, one of the things that we talk about is 10x thinking. How do you get your product to be 10 times better, 10 times more used, whatever that is, in the next year, or whatever the time frame is, right? And so it forces you to think differently than small incremental things. It forces you to be like, what is the big, swing for the fences thing I can try? And now everything's not that, right? You still iterate your thing along the path to get to that 10x. But the fact that Google has all these moonshot things, and we even try to screen for that kind of thinking in the interview process, right? We give you a hypothetical. If you sit there and tell me all the obvious things, maybe that's not going to get you, pushed down the path. But if you have some crazy idea that you can support and is interesting, that's kind of googly.
Yeah, that's a really good, exciting perspective. I know many of us have often been in positions where you're scraping and scratching within your organization to implement something that might move the needle just a little bit, and you're measuring in small percentages. That 10x thinking is a powerful concept. If you're approaching everything to really ask, how can I create massive impact? How can we create massive impact? That is probably one of my biggest takeaways as a fundamental characteristic that you've talked about today, that really drives some of the success that we hear about and that we witness coming out of Google overall. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Can I give a follow-up answer to Joanna?
Yes.
She asked in the chat. So the question she asked, because I don't know if this will be on the recording, is the rating then, back to that Google performance review system, then more about how colleagues give each other recognition, or is there a separate area where recognition is shown? And that's a good question. So in addition to having that rating, well, let me back up. So there's that performance review process where everybody is given these ratings and comments, which is then taken to a committee called a calibration committee, so that all the product managers in a product area can be sort of measured against each other. So everybody sort of, can, not surprisingly, calibrate what good means. And so that, it's also one of those ways of removing bias from the process. So just because your manager likes you doesn't mean you're going to get a good rating, kind of thing. So that's that sort of formal process. But then there's also an internal program where you can give like what are called peer bonuses. So I can recognize one of my peers for doing something awesome, and then they get money as a result. And yeah, and then there's also another thing called spot bonuses managers can give. If you do something awesome, you'll get a spot bonus. And then the culture at Google is such that when you give somebody one of these things, you actually share it with their whole team. Like you send an email around to their whole team, and it has why you gave the person this bonus and all that. And you can give, I'm delinquent because I don't know the number, but you can give them, I think it's every quarter, like 4 or 5 of these things every quarter. And so I'm a bad Googler because I haven't been giving out all of mine, or else I would know exactly how many you can give. But it's like the fact that they give us the autonomy to give each other money for doing awesome stuff is so amazing. And that then the culture is to then share that success across the whole team. And everybody is like, hey, that's awesome. Pitches in like a long email threads talking about how awesome it was. This person did the thing. And then money shows up in your paycheck. It's fantastic. So hopefully that helps give a little more clarity there, Joanna.
That's really powerful as well. That's a great practice to learn from too. So I had a couple of questions. A couple of folks raised their hands as well. Soumya, you had a question that you wanted to ask around competition. You want to jump in here?
Yep. John did mention you guys use Google Notes, Google Docs, stuff like that, right? How do you know what's happening in your competition? Like, let's say I'm using OneNote for my work. As a product manager, you always need to be knowing, right? Like what's coming up next. Is there a team that helps these product managers to know what's going on around the competitive world, or is it becomes the product manager's responsibility still be on top of things?
Both. Super good question. It is both. So when I started, I'm again responsible for this platform thing. Other competitors also have integration platforms. And so I did a deep dive, for research into what the others offer. But we also have UX researchers and teams of people who do competitive analysis and help us understand that landscape. But yeah, as a product manager, you kind of want to have that first party knowledge as well. So it's both. But the other thing I'll point out, something that is, sort of drilled into us and is very googly, I'll keep using that word because it is fun to say, is that we try really hard not to do things to chase the competition. What we try to do is to do things to serve our customers and our users as best as we can. The user-centric mentality is extremely strong at Google. And it's something we definitely screen for in the interview process. And, comes up in every conversation, I feel like, about any product enhancements and why we're doing them. So on my team, we don't generally talk about the financial impact of the thing we're going to do. We talk about the user impact of the thing we're going to do. How many users are going to use this? You know, will it help them? Like one of the metrics we actually had was how much time we're going to save users. And one of the metrics we don't do is how much time do you spend in app. So I'm not trying to make people spend more time in Gmail. I think that would probably be actually a failure if we did that. I want people to get the thing done that they're trying to get done and move on with their day. And that's the beauty of dynamic mail, is baking those little interactions into an email notification message, so that I can, in case like Google Docs comments, I can respond to that comment and move on without having to open a new tab and get the context and do all the things. I could just do the thing and move on, like save time. That's the whole point of this integration platform that I run, is to save people time. I want to save this email to my CRM system. I want to do that in like 2 clicks. I don't want to have to do like this complicated forwarding it to an email address and remembering the thing or whatever pain in the butt it could be. I just want to do like 1, 2 clicks, you know, my life. So it's extremely user focused in the way we do things.
Yeah, thank you. I'm slightly jealous that you are so user focused.
Yeah, I am exceedingly fortunate to be able to do what I do at Google. I am, especially in these times when I know a lot of people are looking for new roles because the way that the economic situation has affected many businesses. I am very, very fortunate to be at Google right now.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thanks. Great question, Soumya. And thank you, John. You know, you mentioned not chasing your competition. For those of you who weren't here last week, we had our session with Jay Cornelius, and it is up there on the YouTube channel right now. And he specifically went really, really deep into that concept, as well as on balancing competitive research with customer focus, and make sure that you're doing the right things for the right reasons that you were just referring to there as well, John. So I want to switch over here for just a second. Tiago has a question as well. Tiago, jump on and introduce yourself. And you wanted to dig in on influence with the dev team and balancing time and research, right?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Hey, John, this is Tiago. I'm here from the Atlanta area with ADP. So one thing you mentioned during the performance process is really you're measured also for the influence you have on the dev team, right? And how you can guide the team through the outcomes, the deliverables. So with all the other activities to craft the vision for the product and to work with customer research and competition analysis, how do you balance the time between these product management vision activities and really working with the team on grooming and helping them on the acceptance criteria of the deliverables you need?
Yeah, that's a super good question. Every team at Google is a little different. The team I'm on, I get to keep it at a slightly higher level. I've never done anything like backlog grooming, for example, or acceptance criteria. Oddly enough, I state, you know, we are trying to solve problem X. I work with the engineers to figure out that we think the problem X can be solved by solution Y. They start building it. We go through a variety of different phases of testing of that to you know, uncover our assumptions, prove them right or wrong. And then this comes back to that sort of continued justification of your project stuff. So I keep producing metrics that say, yes, we are on the right track, or no, we are not, we need to change. I have yet to do something that gets added to the Google graveyard, but I'm sure that at some point in my career that will happen. So yeah, but the core of your question is how do you balance what are unbelievably competing needs that are they're all important, and if you're doing one, you can't be doing the other. Basically, like none of them are like useful at the same time blocks. And so there are plenty of internal jokes about Google product managers' calendars being a hot mess. And so part of the way you do it is just to do all the things. It is at different times you need to focus more on different parts of it. So like the, sort of big visiony stuff happens more on what feels like an annual or couple of annual basis. Like you step back and say, okay, are we still broadly doing the right stuff? What is my next crazy idea that I can pitch? And then there's times when you're trying to get something out the door and you're, what we call chasing bits, approvals and things like that. And in meeting with people, and you have a burn down list of what's going from beta to GA, get all these bugs, and we're good for GA. And so that's a very tactical part of your time. And also, I think different people gravitate differently towards those activities. And so it's incumbent upon you to understand where your natural tendency is and to make sure that you purposefully fight that to get to the right balance. And it's never easy, I'll say. But it's such an important, like if you want to be great, it is so important to be able to balance all those competing needs and find a way to do all the things. And also like some of it depends also what level you're at, right? So, entry level ICs are going to be doing more tactical work. Individual contributor, sorry if I'm using an acronym that isn't well known. And as you move up, you have to do more strategic thinking and more of that stuff. And then different groups within Google have different focuses. So what it means to get information from the user might be different. For me, I work with the partners, so I have meetings with them very frequently because they have specific needs for our platform. And I don't know this to be the case or not, but I can imagine maybe in search, it's a different experience for them. Like, I don't know how they talk to the billions of people who are doing Google searches. I'm sure there's some way, but I imagine it's somewhat different there. So does that help at all? Like I just told you have to do everything anyway, but
No, it does. And it makes me feel better about my calendar. So I'm not the only one suffering with that. Thank you.
One of my former leaders, Jeff Browning, when he was at Silverpop, he kind of noticed that people were, one of the common questions to how are you doing is, well, I'm busy. And he made that slight shift to, well, my calendar is full. Yeah. So I want to kick over, and Arash Farsi has a question for you as well, John. Arash.
Hey, this is Arash. Thanks for the opportunity, Jason, joining the call from Knoxville. So it's always good to see people virtually. John, so I have a question regarding maybe your particular experience, or maybe more generally in Google, the role of the product manager in the long-term health of the product. So, a couple examples from my own experience come to mind, like, you always are kind of fighting or maybe trying to keep a balance between putting more features in and also making sure you don't accrue technical debt, right? Too much, at least. And then there's always the next release where we can, do more things, right? But then sometimes the balance shifts in one direction or the other. So if you can talk about that a little bit. And then also kind of in a longer term, do products shift around in terms of like who the product manager is over time? And then if that happens, what's maybe the process for like, knowledge sharing, knowledge transfer, kind of maybe different vision, things like that. If you can talk about those two things, thank you.
Yeah, sure. I'll try to get them in order. Any engineering organization fights the technical debt versus net new features fight. Google is no different. We are not immune to this fight. We have a bunch of things in place to help make it easier. And given that Google is such an engineering driven company, it's we probably do a fair job of it, but I still see complaints every day about, we're launching this new Google Workspace thing. What about our technical debt that we, have to address? And it's like, yes, we have to do that too. And so, there's things like fix-it weeks where they'll just go and just no new features are built and they just crush bugs for a while. We had, periodically we'll have like these freezes where we're literally just focusing on infrastructure and not allowing people to work on net new functionality. Because it's such an engineering driven company, you get to do that. And, you don't have sales leaders screaming down your neck. Or if they do, I never hear them. So it is a struggle. It is part of technology companies we do the best we can. And then the second part of your question was what? Remind me.
Maybe like a kind of like a knowledge transfer or knowledge
transfer and
sharing.
changes. Yeah. So that's one of the things I meant to mention, bring up earlier. Google, the reason why they make sure that you're good to go as a Google product manager, regardless of the specific role that you may end up getting, is because people move around internally at Google a lot. I work with people currently who used to be on ads. I lost somebody on my team to YouTube. There are people working on smart cities, the Sidewalk Labs thing, or self-driving cars, or whatever crazy moonshot ideas. Like, there's so much healthcare. There's so much you can do at Google, and they very positively encourage people to change roles. And so it is a natural thing for a product to change product managers. And there's usually the things like vision decks, the roadmap things, onboarding, help that outgoing product managers provide. And then obviously you sort of have those strings that sort of last, like even in your new role, you're sort of still helping out with the old role a little bit, just because you don't want any of those balls to get dropped. But yeah, I mean, it comes down to that collaboration culture and those documents that we shoot around internally. That's a big way that we do that knowledge transfer, because that change is always happening around here.
Thanks for the responses.
Jason, you're muted, buddy.
This has been a really good, rich discussion, and there are a lot more questions that we haven't gotten to yet. So, but I think we do kind of need to start landing the plane here, because I know some folks have some 9 o'clock meetings that they need to get to. But I'll keep the bridge. I'll keep the Zoom call open for as long as John and anyone else wants to stay around and kind of continue the conversation. And we can also move over to the LinkedIn group. If you're not on the LinkedIn group, you can go to productcoffee.com/group as a shortcut to get there and join that group. And John, I think you're in there. If not, I'll draft you, and we can put some of these questions that we didn't get to in there, and we can kind of chat a little bit about that in LinkedIn discussion as well. But I do want to kind of pivot back and kind of sum up some of what we've talked about today. And, companies like Google and Amazon, Microsoft, Netflix, Spotify are often held up as great examples of companies that get product right and are really innovative, strong, powerful, titans of our modern industry. As we grow our careers, one of the things that we all want to do, I think, is we want to go back to our own organizations and create influence that can help our own companies evolve to this level of strength. If you were to take some of your learnings over your career and what you've learned at Google, what advice would you give to product managers and product leaders who want to go create these kind of results in their own company to influence the culture to be, to become one of these types of titans?
So the unsatisfying answer is it will be very hard to retrofit this into an organization. But the thing you can do, I don't know if you guys ever read Stratechery, and Ben Thompson talks about this sort of, the stack, principal stack, and the, aggregators and all these things. Like, you can't pick one thing out of Google's strategy and then try to implement it in your company, expect to be Google. It's the sum of all of the crazy things that Google does that makes Google what Google is. So it's going to be hard for you to replicate. But the thing you can do, the thing that I'm glad I get to be a Google product manager because I can carry this forward, is that you can always have that relentless focus on the user. You can always, be doing your best to make sure that you do right by your customer/users, because at the end of the day, that ends up taking care of most of the other things. If you look at the way, let's say Amazon has that relentless focus on the customer, and to the point where for years they would they'd report zero in profitability, right? Everything was going back into the business. They was trying to reinvest. They weren't chasing quarterly results as Bezos wasn't, because he was trying to do right by his users and do right by the business for the long term. If you can take that mentality and make it core to you and how you approach things, you will ultimately get the best results you can get. Hopefully that helps.
That is a great, honest, hard to hear answer, but really important. It's not one or two things. There aren't tricks and tips you can pick up. It's establishing it at the foundation versus.
If it was easy, everybody would do it.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. I want to thank you so much, John. This has been a great session. I want to thank everyone who participated. We've had some great interaction from everyone.
Really good questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's definitely keep this going. I also saw that Shalane is out watching the stream on YouTube, and he dropped a couple questions in. We'll move those into the LinkedIn group as well, and hopefully we can get around to those. But John, I'll let you. I'm going to end the program formally for now. But everyone, you're welcome to stick around as long as you want and continue the discussion. I'm going to stop moderating now and just kind of listen and participate.